The recording has started.
Okay, and that, so this is our quarterly meeting of the the Dispute Resolution Advisory Committee, and we're waiting for a quorum, which I believe is 6 members, if I have our membership count correct, because our bylaws require 50%. Right now we're at 4, unless John and Samantha are both members.
I have not yet submitted my paperwork, so I am not an official member yet, but will be. Not that that's helpful for now, but
just wanted to clarify it, give you credit if you were.
So Brian, there's
I didn't realize Bill was in the room because he wasn't on camera.
So Brian, I just want to clarify that we have Tara, Brian, Angela, Pat, Bill, John, and that's 6.
Oh, that's the joys of Teams where you don't see the second screen.
Oh.
Hey, look at that.
There's Abigail.
So we do have a quorum. The joys of Teams and only seeing one screen at a time. So with that, we can get started officially and welcome everybody to 2025, our first meetings of the year, and that for some, though we're in the second week. And guests or public input, I know we have Abby here. So if you want to introduce yourself, Abby, I think most folks know you, but there may be a few who may not.
Sure. Sorry. I was like, yes, I am here. My name's Abby. I work at Clackamas County Resolution Services. I'm the manager there. And my pronouns are she, her. Anything else I should share?
No. Any word that public input, did you have public input or testimony you were giving or just attending?
I was not prepared to send it. I was imagining I would be able to share as the conversation went, but this is my first meeting.
What we often do.
Okay, cool. Yes. Yeah. But I'm okay, like wait to the end or however it goes. I just didn't really know the protocol, and I'm sorry.
Well, that's okay. It's a school committee. I get to follow their agenda in that. And with that, did folks have a chance to look over the minutes from the October 2nd meeting?
Yes. And Brian, this is John. I don't have any corrections, but there are some mistakes in the stuff I said. So I wouldn't want the minutes taker to bother recording these, but I wanted to correct them for the committee members so that we're all on the same page. And they had to do with my testimony about the history of the special assessment. Special assessment being that park residents and now marina residents pay with their property taxes $10 a year. Now, low value homes in the 4 big counties are exempted from property taxes and from that special assessment. And that low value is set by statute, although it's been indexed and it's bigger in Washington and Multnomah. And I don't remember exactly what it is, but for the other counties, the other 2 counties, which would be Lane and Clackamas or Multnomah, I guess, the low value thresholds, I think 16,500. For the other 2 counties, it's up around 33,000. Anyway, the history of the special assessment is that it was adopted in 1989. I think that was also when MMCRC was created, although I didn't check that. And it was a session in which the tenants were advocating for rent control. And they actually got some traction in the legislature. And it's sort of at the last minute, the legislature moved instead to dispute resolution, because that was a very, that was sort of like the hot legal issue at the time, doing mediation. And there was a professor at Willamette University who was an expert at it. He later became a legislator, Brian Johnson. And so everybody was thrilled that we could do mediation and resolve all disputes. So we don't need rent control. Let's do mediation, and let's do this agency. At the time, it was referred to as the Mobile Home Ombudsman. And let's require that that person be neutral, assist both landlords and tenants, and let's pay for it with a $3 special assessment on manufactured home park tenants. And the tenants liked that. They supported it. I was not involved. It was for my time. Then in 1999, the tenants wanted to expand MMCRC's work to do more. And they, in a bill that the old Manufactured Housing Landlord Tenant Coalition, which I was the leader of, in a bill in 1999, the tenants supported increasing the special assessment from $3 to $6. And in 2015, I think, it was increased. Another coalition bill increased the special assessment from $6 to $10. So the last time it was increased was in 2015. Marina tenants were not added to either the services of MMCRC or the special assessment until the 2019 coalition bill, the last coalition bill. So that's the history of all that stuff. And so and then I guess I should add also in 2019, the coalition's bill increased the annual registration fee for park landlords and now marina landlords, which had previously been $25 for parks of under 20 spaces, $50 for the larger parks. They increased that $25.50 to $5,100. And that largely pays for MMCRC to do the registration work with landlords and managing this required education that the law requires. That also came out of the coalition, I think in 2005, but it didn't have a fee until 2009 at 25 and 50. I don't know whether that revenue from the landlord registration covers MMCRC's costs for actually administering the registration and the education. I haven't seen any sort of numbers that talk about that. Rick Abrego, I think I understand, is thinking about whether that fee needs to be increased to cover the work that MMCRC is doing in regard, I think, to mediation. And I mean, with regard to registration and education for landlords. I'm concerned that the special assessment will need to be increased to cover the other work that MMCRC does with regard to mediation in particular. So, which is why I keep asking about this. And hopefully someday we'll find out. The other thing to note is that in my testimony, or in my comments last time, I said that the funding source for the tenant attorney position that is Samantha Sheehan, I said, I'm quoted as saying that it sunset at the end of 2025. That's incorrect. It's the end of 2026. And I think there are some legislators that are interested in extending that. And I think maybe even expanding it to a second lawyer so that other cases could be done. Samantha is booked. So that's just our background that I wanted to share. Thank you, Brian.
Yeah, no, the other piece I'll add to that is I know in the 2019 or the 2015, they actually added $1.50 of that fee goes back to the counties to cover their costs. So MMCR actually gets $8.50, not that whole $10, because $1.50 for each registration goes back to the county treasurers as well. No, thank you for that, because I know that's a ongoing topic and we'll be talking about it. Other additions or corrections to the minutes?
There were a couple of spelling errors in the first paragraph. So I think it's Samantha. There's an E on the end of end of Tremaine, and then Jan Hamer is with River Bend, not Par Acres.
Great. And
Otherwise move to approve with those corrections
okay.
and John's clarifications.
Is there a second?
Second.
And all in favor, say aye, or if you're on phone and hand raise. And Shauna, is that everybody, being that I don't see all the screens?
Yes.
And I see some other pieces. Okay. With that, the minutes are approved. And we can go on, and then we're into the legislative updates. And one piece we'll add to that is I don't remember seeing a copy of the 2024 legislative report with the minutes or other pieces. And I believe Rick and Alexandria would have submitted that, being that it's in the even years in September. And was just wanting to check on that.
We have it available. We can send that to everybody, or we just, it's a draft one. I know we just finished one. We have it. We can go ahead and get that out to everybody.
Yeah, great. No.
Yeah.
That would be helpful. And that, and the session is a week, a little under 2 weeks away. And John, what do you know?
So I've told you all about this previously. Representative Marsh, Pam Marsh from Ashland, has developed a bill that she that is ready to be introduced. In legislative lingo, it's dropped. The term is dropped. The bill to be dropped. I believe bills will be dropped, a mass of them, on Monday, the 13th. And her bill that I'm going to describe is House Bill 3054. It's not available yet. It won't be available online until all those bills are dropped, I think on Monday. She had a work group that developed the bill. It included some other legislators. And it does a couple of things significant. First, it would cap rent increases for park and marina tenants at CPI instead of the current cap for all tenancies, residential tenancies in Oregon, is 7% plus CPI with an ultimate cap of 10. Secondly, it would cap what is referred to as rent reset, where a landlord raises the rent for a subsequent tenant who purchases a home from an existing tenant, and it would cap that higher rent for the subsequent tenant at a 10% increase. Thirdly, it would revise the law to make it clear that landlords cannot require aesthetic improvements at a sale with a new tenant. They've always been able and always will be able to require repairs, but not aesthetic improvements. An example of an aesthetic improvement arising out of cases in Southern Oregon right now are things like, I don't like vertical siding, I want horizontal siding. So you've got to change your siding, even though the existing siding is just fine. And then the fourth issue would be to prohibit landlords from requiring internal inspections of manufactured home before it is sold. There again, there's a landlord in Southern Oregon that's doing that. There are a couple of mistakes in the bill from the Rep Marsh side that will need to be corrected, so it will be amended. I'm sure that landlords will have some suggested amendments or some suggested suggestions that it disappear, the whole bill. And we'll we'll get there someday. Actually, I think we may start getting there pretty soon. Marsh is the chair of the House Housing Committee. It's called Housing and Homelessness, and there are some new members on that committee, but her party has the majority. In fact, the Democrats have a supermajority this session in both the House and the Senate, which generally means that unless they want to be generous, they don't have to have any Republican votes to pass something. So other than budget things. So Marsh's group met yesterday. She's hoping to schedule this bill for a hearing early in the session. Her committee will be meeting on Mondays and Wednesdays at 1 p.m. Yes, at 1 p.m. I think that will start, the committee meetings, I think, will start on January 27. I think the full session begins on January 21. I think they get sworn in on the 13th, although I'm not sure of that. And Marsh is hoping to schedule House Bill 3054 for a first hearing on February the 3rd. So that's not guaranteed, but that's the current thinking. There will be other bills. I'm not working on any of them, thank God. One of them is coming from Rep. Neron, who she shared a draft yesterday, but I'm not involved in editing and apparently needs some corrections. But her bill is intended to allow or to prevent landlords from prohibiting canvassing in their parks by local officials or legislative candidates. I think her concept is that it would allow the individual tenant to say no canvassing, but not to allow the landlord to say no canvassing for the whole park. Again, I'm not involved in that bill at all. There are a number of other legislators talking about stuff, which is always the case. I don't know. I wouldn't expect, with regard to manufactured housing parks, I wouldn't expect any of them to get anywhere. Marsh may not even give them a hearing. In Oregon, the committee chair controls what bills get a hearing. And or in Oregon, bills have to go through a hearing before they can go to the floor for a vote. So the committee chair has a lot of influence. I would also note that the committee chair is very close to the speaker, Julie Fahey from Eugene, and they started together. And I think they are in lockstep on what they want to do. In the Senate, there will be a new Housing Committee chair. Casey Jama has moved up to be the majority leader of the Democrats in the Senate, and the new chair of that committee has not been on that committee. It's Senator Khan Pham. I don't know her, but others do. Otherwise, that committee makeup is not significantly changed, I think. There are 5 members in the Senate. There's about 13 members in the House, because there are some new members. There are new members in the legislature, and their email addresses are not online yet and won't be until they get sworn in. One cause of a number of new legislators is that those Republicans who walked out in the last session were prohibited from running again. And that included some very experienced Republican senators in particular. Any questions about all that?
No, I guess just one for Rick is, as things move forward, is it your plan to have the legislative person from housing attend the meetings again, or since Alexandria went on to other things, or?
I believe Rick stepped away for a second. I can field that. I believe our new government relations representative is here. Nathan?
Oh,
Yeah, hi. Hi, everyone. My name is Nathan Clark, he, him pronouns. I joined after the last meeting, so this is my first meeting here. I'm government relations at OHCS supporting home ownership division. Can you repeat that question? I didn't hear that.
Actually, by you speaking up, you've answered it. I apologize. I just was curious if the government relations person was going to be attending these meetings. Tara, curious. Let me know that's your job. And so I missed as far as the staff side that you had joined us.
Yeah, no, thank you. I'm happy to be here and look forward to supporting the future. And John gave a better update than I would have given. So thank you.
Great. Well, welcome. And that.
Brian, I didn't want to interrupt, but I just want to acknowledge that we have more guests here.
Okay.
It's also Andrea Pacheco and Anne Vandekovering. I just want to say other CDRC directors are here at the meeting today.
Great. We can make sure they get captured in the minutes there. And do we know when Rick is going to be back?
I'm back. I'm back.
Oh,
I'm back. I'm monitoring the other website, so I had to jump off and send someone in the link to this. So sorry I missed it. Am I up? Is that what you're saying?
that is where you're at exactly.
Okay,
we have
so
the CDRC grant conversation.
Oh yeah, yeah. We're actually at the beginning of it. We just met with our procurement department this morning, getting the new lay of the land as far as how things are going to be processing. And so Shauna and I, and with the assistance of Carrie, will start preparing our grant docs and seeing what the process is. We got a good full 6 months to get this thing done, so hopefully we'll be done early, and we could talk more about it as we move forward. Yeah. So we're right at the beginning. So in the documentation stage, not quite sure. We have a brand new procurement team, excuse me, at the agency. So it's going to be a lot of getting familiar with. There's so many new people that they're more than likely not even familiar with our grants, and so it would be a lot of explanation, a lot of background work to be done. So the good news is that our team is the same, so we'll be able to at least, once we get connected with a procurement specialist, we can talk about the what we need to do, what we need to accomplish as far as the grants go. But that's where we are so far. Not a whole lot of information, but working with Tara on things as well.
And I guess one of the clarities is with the changes in Multnomah County, guessing that it's going to have to be opened up as a new RFP versus an extension, or is it a possibility of doing a mix, or do you know yet?
Don't know yet. And I apologize. I got a throat issue, so I was literally clearing my throat as you were talking, so I didn't hear a thing you said. So please repeat.
New CDRCs potentially coming into Multnomah County. That
yeah. We're still, we don't know yet. I mean, we're still under the limitation of we only have so much money available. So if we, right now the thought is to stick with the same grants that we had from last time, and obviously everyone knows by now that they're going to be significantly, if not tragically, lower than what you guys are used to. But if we break up the pie, same pie, this is going to just be smaller. We have 212,000, and if we break the pie in more to other CDRCs, we can do that, but it's going to be just a smaller all the way around until we get to a situation where we can increase these grants.
Yeah.
Does that help out a little bit?
Yeah, and it's just that clarity, because I know, Tara, I don't know if you want to speak to the changes for Gresham.
Yeah, we're transitioning from a government agency with City of Gresham to a nonprofit, an independent nonprofit, and I mean, I think as far as if we're only working with that 212,000, the centers propose what that dividing up can look like at this time, but we're hoping for additional funding because, there hasn't been a push for additional funding now that there is mandatory mediation. So we're hoping for more support for the centers.
Brian, I
Yeah.
just want to acknowledge there's a question from Kat Dalton in the chat. I don't know if you can see the chat. Do you want me to read it?
That'd be great. I don't.
Okay. Has there been any news on whistleblower, quote unquote, type protections for tenants? I have one park in particular that has a manager who harasses people who contact our CDRC. And Kat is in the Tri-County Deschutes Crook and is it Grant? No. Jefferson.
So I guess I would be the person to answer Kat's question, and my answer would be no. I'm not aware of any proposed legislation that would do anything about whistleblower. There already is a fairly strong statute prohibiting retaliation by landlords for tenants who enforce their rights. And there's one for apartment tenants, and then there's an even stronger one for facility tenants. So I don't know enough about the facts that Kat is describing to know whether there is a need for other legislation. My guess would be that what the need is for a lawyer to represent the tenant who feels harassed, and that could either be a local legal aid program, or if we get more funding for Samantha's position so that we can double Samantha, it could be something like that. But I'm not aware of any legislation that would change the retaliation protection for tenants or do a whistleblower type. And frankly, I would not support amending Marcia's bill to add more stuff. The more things you add to a bill, the greater chances there are for people to complain and vote no. And it's already got a tough road to hoe.
I guess along that lines, is there a clear referral practice that helps Samantha as far as when CDRCs get questions? I see Rick nodding about, and I think that might be helpful for the CDRCs to know what is the referral process to say, oh, this sounds like.
Yeah. Before I do that, I know Abigail had a question, and then Samantha had a question.
It's okay if you want to, I was going back to something that Tara was saying. So if you want to just follow this thread, I'm cool with that. If we just circle back to me later, is that all right?
Yeah.
Okay, great, thanks.
Referrals go through Ken, and then Ken sends them over to Samantha. Ken, you want to elaborate on that a little bit? And then I know Samantha had a question as well.
Well, I'm not sure, I take the complaint and basically, depending upon the availability of Samantha, we forward it on. If there are no resources available, the best that they can hope for is the legal aid or find a private attorney to take up their cause.
No, I think that's helpful because a lot of them on that is if we refer them to the Lane County nonprofit, being if that's where Samantha is, or I know that question is, at least for us, has come up. And I see Tara has a hand up in the chat.
Let me before Tara goes, let me just correct that, Brian. Samantha works for the Oregon Law Center, which has offices all around the state. And so she's not limited to working in Lane County.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, probably the best way for CDRCs to get a referral to me rather than sending them straight to like the Oregon Law Center Lane intake number is to go back to Ken, right? And say, hey, this case didn't resolve. I think that this should get referred. And then Ken can send that over to me. Because I represent, or because I am available to represent statewide, right? And there's only one of me. It is hard to be able to staff all of these cases, right? This grant also allows me to represent people that are a lot higher income than, generally speaking, like LASSO, Legal Aid Services of Oregon, or Oregon Law Center can represent. So my pool of clients is quite large. So what we've kind of done is try to consolidate the referrals through OHCS, through Ken, and then that way I can continuously prioritize those referrals over, if I'm having referrals come in from each office individually, right? Or it becomes a little bit too onerous for me, right? And so I think the best way to do that is to try and consolidate where the referrals are coming from through Ken. That way, I can continue to prioritize those referrals. But yeah, I mean, cases come in from all over the place, and because I'm statewide, it is a big job for one person. So I really do hope that the legislature gives another one of me. That would be wonderful. And then the other thing I wanted to add was just referring to the retaliation statute. I know that this is something that all of my clients have these fears and are worried about harassment and all of this stuff. The hard part about that statute is that there is like a causation element, right? And so if the tenant really is in, say, like arrears for rent, or is really breaking a rule, there is it has to be because of that protected activity, right? So there is kind of a challenge in there to succeed with that kind of a defense or that kind of a claim. But I agree with John that there are protections in there for tenants who are trying to organize. I would say, those tenants, if they're trying to organize, should just make sure that they are not in violation of the rental agreement when they're doing that. That adds them a little bit of an extra protection in terms of going forward with the organizing. And that's all for me.
I think that's helpful. And so
I have a quick question about that, if you don't mind, just to make sure. This is Angela from OSTA, and I handle the intakes for anyone contacting us through the internet, web, email about tenant issues. And so my first line of defense in our protocols is that I try to help direct them to the statute to determine for themselves and advocate for themselves if there's a violation or not, and then encourage them to be in contact with their landlord about that if it's an ORS issue. And then occasionally there seems to be something that is beyond the scope, like a criminal activity, in which I refer them to the police. And then sometimes, very rarely, there's a situation in which the issue is incredibly complicated. And if it's an eviction, I send them to the eviction defense number. So am I hearing that for example, for the past probably year and a half, I've maybe sent only 3 or 4 tenants, referred them to the OLC number for you? Should I be directing them to MMCRC instead? I'm not giving them your direct number. I'm giving them the OLC number or legal aid.
Angela, I think honestly, and maybe this is something that we can chat about with Rick and Ken outside, but my instinct is to say maybe we should kind of loop in OHCS with this, right? Simply because I think OSTA receives a ton of communications. I know that you're pretty proficient in terms of like getting people to where they need to be. And so it's not like frivolous referrals that are, coming in every week, right, to me. So I feel confident about that. And so I want to make sure that, those get prioritized as well and don't just end up getting sent to like the front desk office. And if most of the time, right, for the front desk callers, I don't have capacity for just random cold callers to the program, right? And so if you're just giving them that number, they may end up getting turned away. So if I know, and if we can loop in OHCS and me, then I can let my front desk know. hey, look out for this caller and go ahead and do an intake for them. So I do think that if you can loop me in and potentially in Ken and Rick, and we can chat about this at our next OHCS meeting, and I can get back to you about like officially what we want to do. But I do think that, yeah, looping us in a little bit more before just referring them to that number, that will ensure that we can at least get them through an intake and get them advice. I might not be able to take the case right, but you know, if people have gone through all of the steps to do mediation, to go to OSTA, to try these things, I don't want them to just call in and get turned away at the front door, you know?
Yeah, that's great to hear, and that's great to know and understand. I think only maybe 3 or 4 people in the past year and a half I've sent to that number, but it is usually the people who have been vetted by me. There's nothing in ORS that handles it. It clearly seems like a situation in which, you know, somebody, an attorney, needs to provide some legal counsel, and not me and not anyone else. It's just the issue's either too complicated or it's a clear violation and they need help.
Yeah, totally. I think that that's like I said, Angela, I know you and I know how you operate, and so I feel pretty confident taking those referrals. So like I said, just make sure you're looping me in, loop Ken in if you'd like, but we just need to, as long as I know before they're calling, then I can alert the correct people to get them through.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
Pat and Abby?
Abigail's, I think, first. Thanks. I actually have some curiosities about this conversation too, so I don't want to try to like facilitate myself right now. So I'll just plug this question. I'll put it in the chat, and then we can circle back to that later. But I do have something I want to speak to.
Oh, we lost you.
You
You're
did.
muted.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Yeah. Where did you lose me?
Basic introduction.
Oh, no.
No, you shared that you were going to put something in the chat, and then you
Okay.
said,
I'm
we got you to that.
Okay. Well, I have a kind of follow-up question about the conversation that was just happening, and so I'll put that in the chat, but that's actually not what I'm hoping to speak to right now. So just curious about what this number is and what our access is to it as CDRCs. Because I also get those issues, Angela, where I'm like, this person really, I mean, often, right? I'm like, this person really needs to talk to an attorney, and we just send them to MMCRC, and I don't know what happens after that. So it would be lovely to have a little bit more understanding of what I can help. If there are little avenues of like, no, we vetted this person. Perfect. Okay, thanks, Samantha. Okay, so circling back a little bit to Tara was mentioning some hopes for support for the CDRCs, and Samantha, while you were talking, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't even imagine trying to be one attorney for the entire state for these issues, because that is a huge job. Absolutely. I'm also want to share a little bit about what it's like for my organization in Clackamas. So we have to do this work well, I need at least a part-time staff person dedicated to doing it, and ideally a full-time staff person. And that would be for Clackamas County, a part-time staff person would be $75,000, and a full-time person is $150,000. Then that would be, just with that would be working with volunteers, with volunteer mediators, but having someone dedicated that's doing good work directing those volunteers that know the laws inside and out. So what we're currently getting is $7,000 a year, and we're grateful for that, and we're grateful for everything we've had in the past. And the reason why I'm sharing it is just to show the disparity of what we actually do truly need and where we are. And I understand that everyone is working on it and we're trying, but there is so much potential and so much need for this program, that that it actually breaks my heart that we can't give it the attention that it needs, from my perspective. So there's tenants out there that don't even know about it, and we would like to be getting more information to them. So my question then goes to John, with the bills that you were talking about, Marsh and Neuron, did they have anything around additional funding for centers or mediation? Is that on anybody's radar that you're aware of?
So, Abby, I don't lobby that issue. My focus is very narrow, and has been for, I don't know, 30 years. And that is tenant rights. So I've written a lot of the statutes that we talk about, negotiated and written and lobbied through the legislature, both for apartment tenants and tenancies, and for park tenancies and marina tenancies. And then I lobby also on behalf of affordable housing development. I have not lobbied mediation dispute resolution center issues, although as a historical note, I was one of the founders of what is now the mediation dispute resolution center in Eugene in the early 1980s, and I was a board member and also wrote the articles of incorporation as a lawyer for them. And there's nobody left from that group.
But cool.
Still working at the CDRC here. I think it would be worth having a discussion with Rick, with MMCRC about the financial needs of the CDRCs and how to fund them. MMCRC does not get general fund money. So let that sink in. There's no general fund money in the CDRC. It is entirely supported by the tenant special assessment and the landlord registration fee. And I think the landlord registration fee might produce $100,000 a year. The tenant special assessment, the last time I saw the numbers, which is at least 5 years ago, was producing about $600,000 a year. I think, Angela and I are both board members of OSTA. I think OSTA might be interested in supporting an increase in that $10 special assessment. But we'd also have to think about how it gets used. The special assessment is coming from park and marina tenancies only, whereas the CDRCs serve lots of people. You do mediation, and I'm happy that you do. You do mediation for lots of issues that are not manufactured home park or marina tenancies, or even tenants, period. And so I don't know how we would control that or try to address that. But I think it's worth having that discussion. Rick has contacted some people that I'm very close to, and I don't think I'm saying anything out of school, that the department is looking at its fee structure, which makes sense. And I don't know whether it would make sense for the department to include some of the people who pay those fees in that discussion, since I don't think the legislature is going to pass an increase in the fees without support from the consumers who paid that fee. And that would be the landlords and the landlord registration fee, and the tenants and the special assessment fee. Bill Miner is a representative of the largest landlord group of manufactured home parks and marinas. And so, they would probably want to be involved too. And I guess I can't say more. I can say that there are legislators who are interested in this issue. And it probably makes sense to have that discussion outside of a committee hearing. But I'm not in control of that. Does that answer you asked me two questions. I think I answered one of them.
I was asking if you were aware of any of the bills having funding for mediation. It sounds like maybe, but we're not talking about it, and also not officially, not with the Marsh ones. But I do really just want to thank you, John, for, acknowledging, right, that there is a difference and that an additional conversation, a difference between need and where we are. And everyone acknowledges that, right? So please know that I hear that. I just want to keep speaking to it. And that having a conversation outside of this meeting might be helpful. And any point, I'd be happy to have those conversations and help explain how we, on our end, do separate the differences between when we're working with someone in a park, we're reporting it differently. We have a lot of internal systems that help navigate that.
Now there is, not to belabor this all, but there is a person on this call that knows far more about the funding for the CDRCs than I do, and that would be Patrick Sponsler. I think there has been some general fund money for the CDRCs, just not.
I expect to return.
Just not through MMCRC.
Right. Yeah.
Patrick, can you speak to that? Or I also haven't forgot you, Pat.
Okay, that's fine. I'm fine.
Okay.
Well, I'll just speak to what I believe Abby was referring to was not just general fund money for CDRCs, but she was asking about specifically for manufactured park work. And so when she was quoting the rates of which she was that it requires for her office, she wasn't speaking to the broad services that are provided in other housing stability areas or education services or restorative justice violence prevention. All of those is a different bucket of money that she's thinking about. So what Abby was referring to was just talking about the work that is required to be able to do MMCRC work.
And I think what I was hearing, John, was that one that it is probably a larger discussion with the HCS, and I know Nathaniel is new to the group and hear that one of this is not probably the forum, but there was a pilot project that was done, and that there is, and throughout the budget for HCS, it refers to the value of mediation in multiple pieces throughout the narratives of your department's general budget. But I think it's that catch-22 that there's still not adequate funding anywhere. And I'm hearing Patrick say it's not even at the general budget level either through what comes through the university grants.
Well, that's correct, Brian. I mean, the funding for the base funding level is minimal at best. I mean, I'm always impressed at what the centers accomplish and the amount of work that they're able to do with the resources that they're given, as well as the cost savings that this work has been demonstrated to save the state. It's impressive that it's something around a 2,000% return of investment on that does come in. And so the network's ready to expand services and be able to make a greater impact and broadly. But these, I think the discussion of this conversation is just around how are we supporting the landlords and the tenants of manufactured dwelling communities, and how does this fund be able to provide that support for that statewide network, rather than looking at these other dollars that come in for the other services and the other impacts that the centers are making. And I think what Abby was really demonstrating there was just that disparity of the amount that when her and her team have done the analysis internally at Clackamas County for the amount of work that needs to be done to be able to make a strong impact with MMCRC community members, that there's the funding's welcome, the funding's great, it makes an impact, and there's a big gap in the amount, and they're having to go look for other dollars and other private or public sources to be able to support this MMCRC program. And it would be great if the disparity was not as great, to be able to have to reach into these other buckets or other funding sources.
Great, thanks, Patrick. And Pat?
So 2 quick things. I have to say that as much as I love the kicker, I've never understood the kicker. I know law, okay, so it's not that issue, but I've always thought, shouldn't we be putting something state into savings? Aren't there a few places that need money? Anyway, that's a whole other issue. But it came to mind in listening to this, okay? What I want to do is go back to Angela, and I'm not asking this question in terms of trying to put more work on your shoulders, but when people get referred on, is there some way that it's tracked whether they actually maybe follow through or are able to be helped by someone? Because I can think that some tenants would be daunted, perhaps. The ones that have more complicated issues that may get referred to an attorney, and then they start thinking about they're going to have to pay for this, et cetera, et cetera. So the problem ends up perhaps not being resolved. So I'm wondering about how to track and help, if needed, people who need to be referred on. I have no good answer. It's a question, just.
Yeah, it's a great question. At this time, we don't have the resources to follow
Yeah.
up with and track everyone that comes through. You know, what I try to do on the front line is just assess. You know, sometimes every once in a while we get somebody who writes in and they're upset because they got a rent increase, and you know, the rent increase seems to be totally legitimate and in compliance with ORS. And then there's that second tier that there is what I would call a clear violation if the facts shared with me are true. And, you know, one of the things that we've always done at OSTA is our mission is to empower tenants to help themselves, because with however many there are, and I don't know the number, is it 60,000 or 80,000 tenants? One of those numbers, I've heard both float around. You know, we are a very small, volunteer-led, unpaid staff organization. We do it out of the love of helping people, and we invest our time and our efforts, and we don't do it for money. So if we're spending our time tracking and tabulating, we're not spending our time helping the people who need the help. And so ideally, I mean, I've always envisioned a bigger, grander OSTA that has tracking and that sends out survey like, how are we doing? And tabulates that and continues to improve. But currently on our volunteer model, we just don't have the resources to follow up. We're just busy enough answering the emails, responding, trying to provide information about where they can go to get what they need. Usually it's referring them to the law and saying, hey, you have 20 different issues in this email. I'm trying to unpack them, but let's focus on these two and see what you want to do. And the number one question I seem to ask at the beginning in my years of doing this is, if you find out your landlord is doing something that's in violation of the law and prohibited by ORS, what would you do in this scenario? And if they say immediately, I just want to know, I don't want to do anything, then my response is different. But if they say, I want them to stop and I want to do whatever it is in my power to make them stop, then I provide more tools and more input and refer them to where they need to go. Because honestly, some people just want to know. And I know that doesn't totally answer your question, but I would absolutely love to have a paid staff that could follow up with every email I send and, you know, make sure they're getting good care and that they got follow up and, you know, to circle back and, hey, what happened? Did you ever talk to your landlord about this? You know, can we write it up? I would love a staff for that. But at this point, we don't have that.
And Rick,
it's a good goal.
with that, I'm curious, being that the grant is within the privy of this committee, as far as that, is there a simple report that can be provided as far as the number of referrals and other pieces that has happened to help as a committee to be able to possibly support the increase, what we all see as an obvious need, but officially within our DRAC committee to support the need.
Was there a question in there? I mean,
I guess the question is, can you generate a report to say, here's how many referrals were forwarded to Samantha, and here was the one, a simple type report of how much work has been done over the last year to say, oh, wow.
I'm sure we have we have what we've referred over to Samantha as far as that, but that wouldn't encompass any other, referrals that someone might have sent to the, to OLC. I mean, that would just be what's come through us. It'd be hard to say where, if Angela was mentioning that she would send them to their 800 number, then where bless you, Ken. It'd be, so we can only report on what comes through us, I guess, is the answer that I'm trying to give you. Everything else would be, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, yeah, I've heard clarity today that we should be directing them all through Ken, which I think can start in happening, but I'm also just what the numbers actually are as this conversation goes forward. That would be helpful.
Yeah, we can probably get you that
to
number out to everybody. Sure.
Great. And Tara, you're.
Hello, sorry, I'm fighting a cold, so I was off camera for a bit. Okay, so I'm circling back a little bit to the conversation about the funding for the CDRCs. I just need to emphasize, I think, one value of this committee is that it's also public. So any comments that we're making are public, and it's important to state that when we're talking about funding for the centers, in order to run effectively and serve our communities, many of us can't even take contracts unless it's going to pay for the services that we're providing in that contract, right? So it's not a matter of just the center saying, well, we just need more money to operate. It's particularly for mandatory mediation, right? Senate Bill 586, that's requiring mediation. That mediation services are available in the entire state of Oregon. The centers do this really well. We're a very strong network of centers that can provide that service. And I just need to make the statement so that folks are aware, if it's underfunded, and I'll echo what Abby had said, totally appreciate the level of funding that we had the last biennium, and that was a fluke. And we were told, like, hey, it's a fluke, it's a one-time thing, we're gonna get a little extra funding. Going back to the funding level of pre-mandatory mediation does not support the level of funding that we need to provide quality services. And I'm making the public statement because I want to make sure people don't confuse that with, oh, well, the centers they're just not doing a good job, right? They're not providing enough service, or they're not taking as many calls as they could. It's worrisome for a lot of us when, of course, as everybody feels the constraints of funding for all of their programs and services, and that this is another added service that we're all agreeing to do, even at that lower funding amount. So we do want to know that there's champions in our corner to raise the funding, that's being worked on. I think some of the centers have some ideas about that. And of course, talking offline with Rick's team and everything like that too, just wanting to make that a public statement.
That's helpful. And with that, is there anything else we need to? If not, we can turn to Ken and Stephen to talk about the numbers for the quarter. Hearing none,
I'm not sure I see Stephen on the board any longer.
No, I'm here.
Oh, good.
Good morning, everyone. For the update in regards to numbers, it's gonna be pretty brief overview. A lot of my time was spent working on the owner bill, and in this last quarter, we got a lot of information that's making correction retroactively. So, but I do have information for this quarter, for the last quarter, which we had 45 total participants. Most of the info that was reported to us was regarding to cases where the mediation did not take place, and I want to make note of that. We'll be working on a way of better presenting the data in terms of when we get, wouldn't even be cases of when we have contacts with clients, but the case either solves during development or it did not go all the way through where there was a mediation happening. So I'll be working on that. I'll have a full report out in the next 2 weeks concerning all of this stuff. But yeah, same trends as usual. Most of the time when we do have a mediation, it's either partial agreement or full agreement. Not many mandatory cases were declined. What else interesting is going on here? Mandatory for this quarter, most of it were mandatory mediations concerning rule violation and maintenance issues. What else do we got? Yeah, pretty brief. With the report that I'll send out, I'll also include basically a yearly summary. I know that we don't do it exactly on a yearly basis, but I think it just makes sense for us to do something like that, and also include if there's any new demographic information from the auto report that we do. And that's it.
Great. No, look forward to seeing that, because I know that was going to be something that was going to start getting added to the minutes and other pieces. So all of us would have a chance to look those over and come with questions. And I know that hasn't happened quite yet. So appreciate it. And the other thing Stephen was working on was getting some revisions to the form and that through that the CDRC's input data in to try to make that a little more streamlined.
Yes, and we did, I guess, solve that issue. So the new format for the survey is live and active. I see a lot of people put it in info, and I also want to say that I appreciate the revisions that have came in from all the centers. So that's great. Really appreciate it. And the attention to detail there with the info that was submitted to us. So, yeah.
Right. Okay. Meeting schedule for the upcoming year as we switch to a quarterly. The next one would be April 2nd. And if that works for everyone, we'll have that. And the usual plug for members, and we'll nudge Angela, being that she's been a past Marina folks, that still really looking for referrals and for Marina owners and residents, because that is an underrepresented group on this committee, and by statute and rules we're supposed to be covering the whole state as well as equal number of parties. So also, Bill, if you know of any to recruit on that, would definitely welcome that as well. Anything else for the good of the order? If not, we can let folks go. And
I had one thing, and that's, if we can, this has been a really great conversation. I really, this is probably one of the, lack of better thing to say or how to explain, but it's been one of the better ones. Where we're getting a lot, I mean, we got a lot discussed, but because of that, I think, if we can get more even of the CDRC representatives to these meetings where they're always wondering what's going on. It's like, you really should come to the meeting, and so because it is critical that, everyone hears these conversations and tries to gather the support. I get the struggle you guys are going through, but we're also limited ourselves. We can only, we don't get general funding. So I mean, but there's a lot to say in that. So, we're not mute to the whole things of not understanding I've talked to a lot of you, and I always tell everybody, information is absolutely free. You can always ping me or email me, and if you want to have a discussion offline, we can. That's not a problem. I'm wide open to that, and I enjoy the conversation. I could be a little more candid, but the reality is that we as an agency or as a department of an agency can only do so much, and I'd love to have carte blanche and say, hey, you get a grant, you get it, hey, get it all out there. That'd be great. But that's not the situation right now. But if you want to ping me, absolutely, let me know. We could talk. I have no problem with that. And then if we can we've sent out some emails to the other CDRCs before, and they just don't attend. But this is, tell your friends. We just, it'd be great so they can at least come in. They may have questions that they've always been wanting to ask. I mean, just information is so vital to everyone, and we want to be open and clear of what we're trying to do here. But that's all I had to say on that. But Pat, I see you have a question.
I don't have a question for you.
Oh,
no, it was something, since we're coming to an end, it was just something, an aside I wanted to say. Not to you, to everybody in general.
Yeah, and if you want to let the public comment in the record, we definitely.
Well, this was to finish up something. Some of you will remember that I had trouble at my end, and I could see you and hear you. You could see me, but you couldn't hear me. And we, at the time, were talking about evictions, and the whole thing made me a little crazy because I couldn't talk. What I tried to say was that evictions are rarely just about money. And I can think of an eviction that we didn't do. The mortgage company did it. And in that case, it was just money. They weren't getting money. And the people had the money. They were both employed. There was enough money, but they chose to spend it on things. And it was clear in the house when they were gone and we were in the house. But that's not common. It's more common that there are a number of factors, and money is one of them. If it's money, there's times when we can point people places. But when it gets to be a number of factors, then it's kind of like overwhelming. And we actually don't do many evictions at all. I know that we did 3 in 1 year a couple of years ago, and we did 2, and the mortgage company did 1. That was completely unusual. And in my more than 20 years in this park, in this position, it's not common at all for us to evict. And so that's what I wanted to say.
And
there, I said it.
A little late. How many spaces you have? Because I know you're a larger community.
We have 100. There's 115 counting the manager's house.
Just to help give some perspective of your great work. And
oh, thank you. Money can usually be worked out.
Great.
Pat, I would just like to say that I wish every landlord in Oregon was like you. You have been absolutely lovely and reasonable, and I love hearing your perspective. So thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. I feel unknowledgeable of listening to all of you who've had many years of experience from different perspectives than mine. I've learned a lot.
Samantha shared that in the chat as well from her perspective, Pat. So
We learn from you too, Pat.
and that's the one of it takes a village. So we
Yeah,
thank
let's get some more
everybody.
Pats out there. Can we copy Pat? Get some more Pats out there.
And don't forget Bill. He's
Oh, I'm not a landlord.
well, I know, but you represent them and work with them and also do a good job in educating and helping on that. So
Yeah, we got some good ones out there, and Pat's definitely one of them.
Yeah.
We've also got some not so good ones out there. There's no doubt about that.
yeah, which is the
Yeah.
hard part because that's usually what statute gets created based on the few bad ones versus all the good ones. So, and that. So anything else in the closing? If not, we can see everyone in April.
Yeah,
Thanks, Brian.
if my team could stick around, that'd be great. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
The recording.
Thank you.